Hi, I'm Patrick Inhofer from TaoColor.com, and you're about to watch a brand new video from my DaVinci Resolve MasterClass. It's on the brand new release of DaVinci Resolve 9, and it teaches you how to upgrade to it pain-free, as well as a pretty good overview of the brand new UI to get you up and running on it quickly. And if you enjoy watching this video, you are the perfect candidate for the Tao Colorist Newsletter. It's free, and frankly, I think it's the best darn newsletter on the internet. Don't take my word for it. Surf over to the page, scroll down to the bottom, look at the comments. You'll see a lot of people agree with me. If you enjoyed this video, you will too. And if you're watching this on YouTube, also check out the lesson page for this video. It contains some additional information, some more links you might want to take a look at. Enjoy. Hi, Tao Colorists. Patrick Inhofer here, and yeah, we've got DaVinci Resolve 9 in the house, and I got to tell you, I love it. I've been using it for probably over a month now, and the Resolve guys, the DaVinci team, has been tremendous. Introducing new features all the time, cleaning up whatever bugs we've all found. I've got to say, because this is, called DaVinci Resolve 9 Beta, there's been some questions as to whether or not you can do work on it, and my answer to you is yes, but I would suggest you start out the right way, and in a couple minutes I'll show you the right way. Quickly though, I just want to cover some basic homework here. As we've got a brand new version of Resolve here, we've also got a brand new config guide and a brand new user guide, as well as, if you are new, tutorial clips. There are some new types of clips, including an XML for the Resolve 9 version. I haven't read through the entire manual. I'm assuming that that has something to do in here. But so you've got that. That comes as part of the distribution when you download it off their website. Let's take a look at their website real quick. It's been updated. You can download the 9 beta here. You can separately, if you just want to, read the manual without downloading it, the whole package, you can do that there, as well as the configuration guide for Resolve. So what's changed between Resolve 8 and Resolve 9? And the big thing that's changed is the OS. So Resolve 9 wants 10.7.4 or 10.8. Okay, so 10.6 is no longer supported with this latest version. It's supported in Resolve 8, but not supported in Resolve 9. So that might be your biggest obstacle to upgrading. You'll probably need to upgrade your OS. I'm running in 10.7.4. I have not yet gone to 10.8. I'm waiting for one other piece of software of mine to give me the all clear, and then I will. But I would advise you, if you can, give it a shot. I've been hearing good things about it. Just back everything up so you can always restore if things go bad. You can see that they haven't dropped off. The early 2008 is still supported up through the regular systems on the Mac Pro. And the same thing is true on the iMacs, and whatever the system requirements were before, they still hold today, except you've got to upgrade the OS. The other thing you're going to want to do is Resolve 9 now wants you on this most recent version of CUDA, 5.0.17. If you have trouble downloading, now you can do it right from this control panel that Resolve automatically installs when you install Resolve 9. And if you're not there, you should be able to press this button. I had this fail on me several times. I couldn't get it to happen. Went to Twitter, and then they said, yeah, just download the driver from NVIDIA's website. And that's what I ended up doing. So I downloaded this driver, and it installed perfectly, and I haven't had a problem since. The other thing I want to point out to you that's new with Resolve 9 is the user manual. 609 pages of user manual. The old user manual, I believe, was in the 450-page range. So not only do we have 150 new pages, I think every single page has been rewritten. I mean, this thing has pretty much been rewritten from scratch by our good buddy Alexis Van Herkman, author of also the color correction handbook. And I just want to outline, for instance, some of the new things that we find in this manual is, all right, lift, gamma, gain. How do these controls work within the tonal range? Beautiful. A great diagram showing what I've always known to be true, which is lift has an effect all the way up through, almost including the brightest whites, and gain has influence almost down through the darkest blacks, with gamma having this kind of influence throughout the entire range. I've always known that to be true, but this is the first time I've seen a graphical representation of how these controls work. The new log controls, which I'll show you in a moment, the new log controls, if we come down a couple pages now, here are the tonal ranges on the new log grading. And so you can see just how limited the overlap is. And the high range kind of, it takes this, if you think of these as three little bubbles that squish and expand. So as you expand out the low range and make the shadows take more, have more influence, the midtones kind of squish with that. If you were to take the shadows and make them less using this low range control, and you were to give them less influence, the midtones would expand out for that. That's my reading of this. And now that I see this, because this has been a big question of mine, now that I see this, I can kind of test it and see how it works in practice. But I mean, this is just one example of the great new bits of information in the manual. It's fantastic. If there's something you're stuck on, the manual's there. Pull it out. Do a quick search and a quick find, and whatever it might be. Let's see what happens. Keyframe. It used to be if you did a search on keyframe, nothing would happen because it was all called dynamics. And there we go, keyframes. Because one of the changes in this version, dynamics are now keyframes. Woo! Yay! We no longer have to learn a whole new language. The other big change too is timelines. Sessions are now timelines. I'll talk about that more in a moment. All right, so this gets us through our quick overview on some housekeeping stuff that you'll find when you get into Resolve 9. And this is the welcome page. You can see I've already got an account set up. The first thing you're going to have to do, now let me be very clear, this tutorial is for existing Resolve users who are migrating to Resolve 9. All right, so I'm going to assume that you already kind of have a good understanding of Resolve 9, and you just want to get the overview of what's changed and what you need to know. That's what this tutorial is about. And so what you're probably going to have to do is upgrade your database. There are two new types of databases in Resolve. And if I were to come in here and click Create a new database, I've got this SQL and disk. If you're brand new to Resolve, you're automatically going to default to disk. And you're going to give your new database a name. So I'm going to call this Resolve 9 Beta Demo. And click here to select a directory. All right, and what I've done is I've got saved in my Documents folder Resolve projects. Now what I've discovered is one folder can only have one database. So if I were to set this for my new database I'm about to create, I've already got a database in here. It's just going to link up to this database, and I'll have two databases sharing the same data. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Resolve 9 Beta Demo. Now I've got a clean folder. I hit choose. And that's it. I don't have this database name thing, this user stuff, password. None of this counts anymore. This is now living in whatever folder I tell it to. That's where this database is going to live. This is the default behavior for new installs of Resolve. Unless you're a facility and you have strong reasons for sticking with this alternate way of, this old way now, of doing database management, I'd suggest you start migrating to the disk database, simply because that's the direction that Resolve is going in. All right, so you've created a new database. I don't recommend you start by upgrading a database. In fact, what I recommend you do is before you install Resolve 9, back up your databases. So I've got now this Resolve 9 Beta Demo disk database. The way you do an upgrade, new controls up here. So you're going to find all through Resolve interface this little icon on the edges of windows. This gives you additional controls. In this case, on the old SQL databases, you have all these options. If we go to the disk-based database, there's really none. I mean, I can select it, or I can connect to a different database. So I'll just hit select. All right, now we're in a new user. And automatically we can see that they've cleaned things up. It's much more friendly, much more approachable. Database icon here. Set up new users there. What you're going to want to do if you're migrating, now if I come up here for preferences, to set my preferences, I can't, not from in here, not from any obvious place. What you've got to do is command comma. So command comma now brings up what used to be, still is the overall preferences. The big, huge thing here you want to take a look at, show all mounted volumes in the library. In other words, any volume, any drive that's connected to this computer will now automatically be seen by Resolve. You no longer have to add it in this window and then restart the machine. It's automatically just there. That's huge. Woohoo. Love it. But you will notice that any scratch disks that you add in here will show up with a unique icon within Resolve itself. This is huge. System overview. Hey, what cards does Resolve see? This is going to show you what cards Resolve now sees. The other thing you're going to want to do is, if you're using a control panel, what I recommend on the upgrade is go to No, hit Save. It's going to ask you for your password, and until you have to, those changes will take effect next time you start. Then come back right away, and then just toggle it. We're just doing a toggle here. We're just doing a toggle just to kind of refresh Resolve. And I find that, every time I do one of these database upgrades during the beta cycle, that this generally helped me solve any problems I had. Then I'd quit out of Resolve, start it back up, and I'm good. Advanced is, I don't know what that's for. All right, cancel. So let's go into our admin account. And of course you can do things like, click this gear here, change the picture, password, stuff like that. All right. And I've got a default project. Now this is typically how you would come into, you'd find Resolve. It'll have a default project in here with this dummy frame, plus and minus for managing projects. This allows you to pull up other databases that this system can access. In other words, I've got a show right there. And now I could, from this other database, import this show. In fact, yeah, why the heck? Why don't I do that? So I'm going to import this show from there. And this is how I suggest you do it. If you if you're upgrading your database, don't work in the upgraded database. Create a fresh database, then navigate to it, and then import whatever it is you want to pull in. And why is this? Because Resolve seems happier that way. I found that for a while there, I was submitting a lot of bug reports that weren't bugs. And I found what I would do is, if I started a fresh database and started a fresh project in there, those bugs disappeared. And they were usually in the form of weird interface stuff. I press a button, something didn't happen. The way to solve that is start a fresh database, import your projects into the fresh database. So we'll come back as soon as this is done importing. And then there's another project. Let's bring in a second project. Let's go to another database, and this time we'll go to, let's try this Tao Resolve. Yeah, this has the tutorials. And let's pull in lesson 5. And again, right-clicking, right-click everywhere. I mean, if you don't know if something can be done, just, right-click, and, that's all. Resolve is still the right-click maven that it always has been. And from another database, I'm pulling in a different project. Taking in these two timelines, these two projects took about a couple minutes. And we can close this down now. And you can see we've got a couple different views. You notice these little stills, these draggable things. Well, for every project, Resolve will pull, I guess, 5 icons. And that's what if I go slower, it's not like it's going to give me every frame in the movie. It's just pulled a couple representative films at each, every 20% along the timelines. and that's what it's showing us there. This project here, I pulled this in. Chances are I moved this media, so it's not finding it right now, and that's why it's coming up black. I can also change my view. I don't particularly care for this view, so I usually work this way. And then I can sort by name, and it makes it very easy to keep track of what's going on. You can also, if you've got a huge list, you can search. So if I wanted to find anything that said left, right, go left, and now it's automatically sorting. Let's go into week 4, lesson 5. And here we are. Welcome to Resolve 9, and it's completely different. The first thing you noticed is, where's the configuration page? Where are all the buttons and all the setups and all the goobly goobs, right? It's all gone, right? It's all here in this little wheel, and now we've got our project settings window. And that's where all this has disappeared to. You're no longer initially presented with just that huge mass of decisions to make, many of which you didn't even need to make decisions on. But a couple things I would point out to you. Of course, Resolve 8 colorists are well familiar with this. A couple of things that you want to take a look at. One of the big things you're going to want to do before you import and create a single timeline is handle mixed frame rate material. So this is a big new feature and should save us all a bunch of time. I've already been using it on 30 FPS footage in a 2997 timeline. I used to have to jump through some hoops to make that work properly and relink back in Avid. Now this is working great. So handle mixed frame rate material is in the master project settings down at the very last end. It's great out here because I already have a timeline. I already have stuff in the media pool. This is something you want to set before you do anything. Another thing to look up in here are versions. So version name presets. As you version out a shot, you can set up so that your first version, maybe the first 3 versions never have a name, but maybe version 4 is always your hero shot, your hero grade. And so then at that point, whenever you hit version 4 on a shot, it'll automatically be given tagged as hero grade. So if you have some sort of predetermined workflow you always go through, and version 2 and version 3 and version 4 are always the same thing, you can pre-name them in here and it'll auto-populate. Audio is huge. You can enable and disable here. Brand new feature here in Resolve. Encourage you to read up on it. We're not going to get to it in here. I'm trying to get you up and running. Some new camera raw stuff. The 4 cameras, including the Cinema DNG for the new Blackmagic camera. Regular control surface stuff, your autosave presets. Autosave seems to be working very well now. And as well as your configs that you can save. Now you know where the config tab went. Now we've got this media tab that handles pretty much everything that you handled in Browse, includes some additional stuff, metadata in here. If I were to play this down, if there was audio embedded in here, you would see the audio bop up and down there. A lot more detail telling you what a shot is, as well as in other places, for instance, in the Conform tab where you don't have this window, this little index card icon opens up, gives you much of the same information. And then, of course, right-click, and you've got all your various options. So the rest of this should be pretty self-explanatory. Conform is pretty much conform. I mean, that's what it used to be. The first thing that threw me off on this was, what the heck is this effects pool? This is just the different wipes and transitions you can have in your timeline. And, for those of us coming from Resolve 8, normally the EDL is in here. Just click here, and you've got your EDL back. All right, which is an easy way to make sure I'm always extracting the real numbers the way I should. And this is an H.264 project in which everything was named Real 1. So I am extracting the data as I should be. The one confusing thing, one problem I had was, where the heck do I pull in my XML or EDL? You hit the plus, and that's for creating a new timeline. This is the one place where you really, if you don't know to right-click, you're dead in the water. So you need to right-click, import XML. Or, if you're really struggling, you hope and you go up to File, and now there's these new import options under the File menu, which I don't think were there in 8, but I could be wrong. One of the new things here is this little slider for expanding out your timeline. Shift-Z still works, although, Shift-Z kind of drives me a little nuts. Rather than framing up the window using the available space, it uses only half the available space. A Command plus throws it kind of, I'm losing now. If you see how much of this timeline I'm losing just by doing a single Command plus, it's doing a huge zoom in. I can't frame it up and just get it so this perfectly fits in here. This little control in here controls a bunch of new timeline view options. So let me zoom in. Let's zoom in a lot. Because you see, as we really zoom in now, we're zoomed in pretty tight. And now this is like the film strip look, which drives me nuts. At the very minimum, I want like this, where a picture frame at the head and tail of the shot. So if I zoom out, you can see how now we just have picture frames at head and tail of the shot. I can control track height. It'll create little audio waveforms in here if I had audio. Control that on and off. Flags and pins we'll get to in a minute. Turn those on and off. And then this view option, which is get rid of all that silly little pictures. I'm a professional, let me grade. And this doesn't even have a track height. It's just, and this is great if you've got, 8 tracks up here. I tend to work like this. Audio options including mute. Mute is in a couple different places. All right, so now, looking at this feels pretty much like I'm used to. And one other thing, you notice timelines. These are no longer sessions. It's a master timeline, not the master session. Hit plus. It's all timelines. Everything's a timeline now. Sessions are gone. Yay. So we can all talk about timelines. And we've got a timeline window here and a timeline window there. And then we go into the color tab, and we've got our mini timeline and then our thumbnail timeline. It's all a beautiful thing. And here we are in the color tab. The color tab has combined several windows together. All right, so combined in the color tab now is what we used to have as our normal grading environment, plus this also includes our tracking environment, plus this includes our resizing and reframing environment, plus this includes all the burn-ins, all the burn-in metadata we can burn into our pictures on our renders. All right, all of those have been combined into this one menu. Where are they all? So here is our curves, qualifiers. You can see they've completely revamped the iconology of the power windows. The tracker completely revamped. They took that huge panel over here, turned it down into here. Now, one question you might ask is, well, that's great, but where do I get my big window now to check out and maybe add points and control my points? That's up here. You see this little 4 arrows expanding out? Click on it. There you go. It's also mapped to Option F. So I can toggle that between Option F, toggle that on and off. All right, this is really nice. This is also great when you're working with your qualifications and want to pull up something. Much easier to quickly toggle into that. The only complaint I have about this feature is I tend to work like that. And it's something, a habit I picked up, Robbie Carmen mentioned to me once he was doing it that way, and I started working this way, and I love working this way. And then I'd love if I Option F, pull this up when I need it, and then Option F again, and have it remember the state I had. By the same token, if I'm working with this really big, and just for a moment I want to pull up, and then I toggle back, oh, it keeps it really big. All right, so it saves that information. What it doesn't save is the fact that I've made it completely disappear, and now it wants to keep bringing it back when I want it gone. All right, so here's our tracker. Blur controls, key input and output controls, and you got your node key as well as your key mixer, external matte. You can switch between those. There's our input and output resizing. 3D, this isn't a 3D project, so I can't pull it up. And then the data burn-in, which they've added a whole bunch of functionality to this. We're not really getting into any of the dailies. Well, we're not getting into any of the dailies workflow here. This is really focused on colorists and color grading. But there's a whole, this Resolve 9, besides the UI, one of the big things is making this work for dailies, and that's why we've got all those audio controls, and this is more of that. Tons of control in here, both on the overall project or on individual clips. You can have special settings on each clip if you wanted. Gang controls, so if I come up here and do that, and I want to undo it and ungang it, do it there. So you see the check mark is gone, select it again, check mark is back. This is going to happen all over the place. Gangs, resets, all sorts of options pop up here. If you're looking for an option that's missing from Resolve 8, there's a good chance it's hidden in one of these menus. Let's add a new view. Oh, by the way, keyboard shortcuts have changed. So one of the things to look at here is editing. You see keyboard layout for Resolve 8 and 9. They've remapped the keyboard for Resolve 9. It will drive you a little bit nuts at first, especially because the up and down arrows are now used for navigation, not for enable disable clips. So the very first time that you come up here and you press up arrow and down arrow to enable and disable, not working. Option D will do that. As you'll see, Option D turns everything on and off. Command D turns off just the highlighted node. All right, you're going to have to relearn the keyboard. I kind of like it. They've included the one key I use. The two keys I use all the time are the semicolon and the apostrophe, which takes me to first frame, last frame. So I'm using that all the time. But let me show you what has to be probably my second favorite feature. I'm going to add a node, which is now Option S. It's in the curves. This little icon right here, you click on it. Boom, baby. That's awesome. Love it. Look at this. You can do some really nice fine-tune work in here that would have been impossible just using this little thing. I mean, you know, I touch it and the darn thing pops, right? I touch it and the thing pops, whereas I come up here and now I reach for it. It's nice and big. It never pops on me. It never moves around as I grab it. I love this new feature. Ungang it here if I want to. Right? And then if I want to get rid of it, I just click anywhere else in the interface. And I can regang this now and reset, and I'm back to normal. All right, another thing that's changed here. The link icon is no longer that little red bar. It's now this little orange arrow. It's pointing forward, but you can see that it's actually non-directional. It seems to suggest that they would also point backwards if it was linking to a shot before it, but it's not. You can see in here this is a linking to a shot that's before it, even though it's pointing forward. So this is one place where I love overall all the new icons and all the new graphics and the makeover they did. But you know, then you get inconsistencies like this where it's pointing forward, which means I would think that it's telling me, it's being smart about it, but it's not. It's a dumb arrow. It's just a stupid little icon that has no relationship to whether or not there actually is linking to a shot behind it or in front of it. I would love that this thing became smart. It would really speed up my workflow, and I'd have to think a lot less while I'm grading, which is always a good thing. And but the way it is now, not true. So you're going to find I think I've got some tracks on some of these shots as well. You're going to find all sorts of new icons popping up on the thumbnail timeline here. Here's showing tracking markers. The cool thing I love the most about the timeline, two things. One, there's a brand new view mode for the timeline, which they call the light box. Click on it, and now I've got, look at all these shots in my timeline, completely filling up the interface. So if I'm hunting for a shot, I can scan my entire timeline, 230 shots, just like this. And if these thumbnails are still too small and I can't find what I'm looking for, completely adjustable. How cool is this? This is awesome. All right? Love it. That's probably like feature favorite number 4. Feature favorite number 1, because I use this all the time, is the filtering. There's this new timeline filtering. Right now it's filtered to show me all the clips. If I'm at the end of the show and I wonder if I missed any shots, I can show ungraded clips, and look, there's one shot that's ungraded. I missed that shot. Now if I were to come in here and unfilter, I've got that shot selected. It's focused on that shot. I see it in context of the timeline. Let's zoom out the timeline. There it is. All right. And now I can come in here and grade this shot. The other cool thing, and actually it's actually a workflow thing as well. This shot here. You remember in Resolve 8, if you come back for revisions, you've got to, what I used to do is whenever I touched a shot and revised it, I'd immediately render it out. Well, what we can do now is tag it. So what I can do is right-click on the shot, and I can flag it as red, saying, all right, I need to render that out. Okay? Now, I'll show you why in a moment you don't actually need to do that, but you can do that. There's another reason why you would want to flag a shot, and that involves the Conform tab. So let me jump back into the Conform tab, and right-click on this shot, and I can find it in the media pool. There's the shot in the media pool. Right-click on this shot in the media pool, and say Find in Master Session. Okay, not there. How about Find in Master Timeline? No, not there either. Then I come in here and I highlight this shot. Right-click on it. Find in Master, find in Media Pool. Where the heck is Find in the Master Timeline? It doesn't exist. The command is gone. The Resolve guys know it. I've had a conversation with them about it. They're working on that functionality to get it back to us. In the meantime, what I figured out is I can just use flags. So if I need to find a shot in the master session, and if you're new to Resolve and you're watching this and you wonder what the hell I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But for those of you who know you need this functionality, this is a great shortcut in Resolve 9 because we've lost the functionality. You give it a flag. So I could say, whenever I need to find something in the master timeline, I'll flag it cyan. All right, you see a shot can have multiple flags for multiple different meanings. Now what I can do is come up here, great new feature. I can automatically switch timelines up here. Go to my master timeline. All right, you see the master timeline is not being kept in sync with whatever timeline I was at. So I've lost that shot. How do I find it again, especially among 230 shots? I filter, show flag clips, any flag, and there it is. I've got my flag clip in the master session because I'm in the master timeline here. And now if I want to see if there are other shots sitting around it in the master timeline, that I just show all clips, keeps it focused, and there we go. So I've now found this shot in the master timeline without ever having to leave the color room. All right, because now I can just come back and let's go to a different shot, and when I jump back into my other timeline, it remembers where I was, and it brings me back there. I can get rid of the clear all, get rid of the flag, or I could just keep the red one for rendering, and you'll see why in a minute we won't need that. But just as a backup in case, as if you don't trust Resolve to keep track of things for you, because you'll notice one of the cool filters is show modified clips last 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, and 24 hours. Yes, what I really want though is I've had days where I've come in 12 hours later and started modifying stuff, and I really want to render anything in the last 12 hours, like between 6 and 12. I can't get there. This is not customizable. So it's a pretty big jump between 6 and 24, but still awesome. The other thing it does is show unrendered clips. So if you've done a partial render and then stopped because you hadn't graded the entire project, you can come back and then say, I don't remember where I stopped yesterday, just show me the unrendered clips, and that's what it'll do, and then you could render based off of that filter. All right, so we have a bunch of different options here. So for me, that's a big new thing coming into Resolve 9. All right, moving across, we've got now in our primary section, they've changed the icons here. This to me looks like it should be the RGB sliders. It's not. It's, oh yeah, it is. Oh, they changed it up. All right. So this is RGB sliders. This is RGB mixers. All right, and they've kind of changed how this looks. Of course, with you go monochrome. Reset all. Of course, in here, under the color wheels, we have our normal lift gamma gain. Switch it to log. shadow, midtone, highlight, and offset. So now we've got our log controls in here. And one of the things to note is this offset wheel. So let's Option S, add a new node. And I'm going to just take this offset. And this is kind of like a big tint control is essentially what it feels like. So it's like a master tint control, which if you come into primaries, it's the offset control in the primaries. What used to be, I think, the printer lights is now offset, and that's exactly controlling these controls here, using it here. Again, go into the manual. In this tutorial, I'm not going to talk about how to color log. This thing's already long enough. All right, and now what would a discussion be without talking about the still store? Depending on when you first open up this window, you may find, let's bring this back up. You may find your system looking more like this, where you've got all your base mems, but where the heck do I grab the still store? It's buried down here, and you just got to lift it up. And you can cover those base mems completely if, like me, you rarely use them. Click on this icon here, and now you've got your different pages. Cool thing now is double click, and I can call this Act 1. Act 2, I'm using this all the time now. I'll have a tab for interviews, one for exteriors, one for people. We've still got our power grades that we can pull in. And by the same token, let's go on her. I usually have one node on her that's her jacket isolation. So what I can do is change the label. Call this coat isolation. And we can now name our nodes. How cool is that? If I were to come onto him and display her node graph, drop this in here, and the code isolation name goes with it. One thing I was a little disappointed that didn't happen was sorting these by giving me different sort options. So, we can sort stills. We still can't sort stills by clip name, which kind of drives me nuts. Now, this is an imported project, and it loses all these things get renamed exactly the same, which is a whole other issue. And this has happened in Resolve 7, I think, Resolve 8, and now this happens still in Resolve 9. Gallery, not much has changed, except the looks are now pre-installed. It used to be you would have to come in here and say import looks, and it would import these looks. Now these looks are here. Now they've done this cool thing with group stills, and they're grouping these. What I would love is be able to do this with my power grades. I don't have any power grades loaded up right now, but I've got power grades that aren't just looks. I've got power grades that are fixes. I've got all sorts of different utility power grades, and I'd love to have a folder for my utilities, a folder for my looks. And be able to sort them how I want to sort them, not just with the pre-populated DaVinci Resolve things and with the DaVinci Resolve looks. I'd love to have this functionality available to me. As it stands now, it doesn't. All right, so they've got all these. The other thing I would have loved to have seen, Magic Bullet Looks has had this for years. It's an awesome feature where why can't these update with whatever frame's loaded up in here? All right? Her face, she's a beautiful woman, but it tells me nothing about the shot and how this will look on the shot that I'm looking at. These really should be able to update with the image that I've got currently loaded up. All right, that's the only thing I have to say about that. Before we hit deliver, one of the things I realized I forgot to mention in the previous are unmix. So, we can toggle between clip and track, right? What's missing here is the unmix that used to be up in this right-hand corner here is now here. This is the new unmix toggle, as well as audio muting in here as well. All right, going to deliver. This has been completely revamped. This is the render room. completely revamped. Number one, it's now part of the buttons down here. It used to be, I used to laugh all the time that you had all these buttons down here except the last button, which was render. Well, now here it is. It's deliver, and it's more than just it's delivery, right? So we've got our easy setups like we would normally expect. So I'm going to pull up the Final Cut Pro export. I can now select, as usual, H22 HQ. I'll just run through this real quick as if I was actually doing it. I'm going to render this job, and I'll render to my MasterClass folder. And of course, like we used to be able to do, you can still create a new folder, demo, delete me. And I'll make that my folder, click OK. And we'll do, this is the Final Cut Pro workflow. So yeah, we'll render each clip with a unique file name. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's add 48 frames of handles. And now I can add this as a job. So now I've got this job queued up here. I think we've got a little bit of a bug. Technically, what should be happening is as I highlight this, I can come in here and make changes. So I can come back, make this 422, come up here. Let's switch this back to HQ. Now this should still switch back to 422. It does. Come back here. I'll switch it back to 444. I'll switch this to export to Final Cut Pro. Now if I switch back here, it remembers the 422, but it keeps losing the easy setup. I think this may be a bug. When you click away and click back, it seems to be forgetting. It hadn't done that previously, so I think we've got a bit of a bug in here. So what you're going to want to do before you do your final render, make sure that this is properly selected. Because the other thing I can do is I can add an additional output. So I've got all these basic render settings set up, but let's say I want to create an additional output. And we're going to render this out to QuickTime. And we'll do a proxy version. And I can create a subfolder for proxy. And now you notice I've got a batch set up. So now this is a batch, and I can continue to create additional outputs. So let's say this one will be, in fact, QuickTime, and we'll make this MPEG-4 video. And I'll call this iPad. All right. So what it's doing is it's taking all the same basic settings and just giving me multiple deliverables. Fantastic for, again, this is really considered kind of like for dailies workflows, where maybe a low-res proxy goes to editorial, but a higher res might go to visual effects. That can happen inside this batch. Now what can also happen is I click out a batch. Now let's switch from Final Cut Pro to Avid AAF, and we'll do render to MXF. And I'll set this to, this is fine, 8-bit. And what I can do is now browse this down, and let's instead go to my Avid Media Files MXF folder. For Avid users, this is where you want your clips to live. And then I'll give it a subfolder with today's date, 08/01/12. I'm going to delete these additional outputs because I don't want them. That was for the QuickTime version. I don't want them for the Avid version. And let's say the rest of this is okay. Hit Add Job. Continue. And now I've got an MFX DNX HD job queued up. And what's going to happen when I hit Start Render? It's going to start this batch job, and when it's done with this batch job, it's going to start rendering this job. Now let's say that we have one final version to do, and we only want to render out the clips that have the flag in them. All right, and let's keep everything else the same. We're still doing the Avid workflow for this experiment. I come down here. Here's my little filter. Show any flag. Well, let's say only red flags for the purpose of this. Show red flagged. Now what I want to do is right-click, and the other weird interface thing in here is, where's my Select All button? I've got an in and an out point. I've got a duration. What I don't have is a Select All button. Not that I can find anywhere. What you have to do is, in this little area, right around where the timecode numbers are, right-click, Render All, and then you get this, and you can zoom this out. And by the way, you can zoom this out even as it's rendering. So I got this all the way zoomed out. And now, add this as a job. And now what I've got is this job is just these 2 clips. This job is the entire timeline. And I can zoom this out, and this orange bar is letting me know that it's the entire timeline. Let's see, does it keep the Avid? No, it's losing. It's seeing MXF DNX HD here. So it's clearly keeping that data, and it's keeping that. But it makes me a little nervous because part of these easy setups is it'll embed the metadata that Avid requires. But it'll only embed that metadata if I tell it it's an Avid AF round trip. Same thing with Final Cut. Metadata gets embedded in a certain way, and that fixes it. Yeah, so I'll be sending that to the DaVinci boys, the DaVinci team, after I finish up this tutorial. And then if I were to go ahead and press render, and I don't think I'm going to mess anything up if I do that, so I'll go ahead and do it. And away it goes. So it's giving me time estimations, frames per second, and this probably will start picking up pretty momentarily. I've been getting on ProRes footage, I've been getting 32 frames per second. This is H.264 footage coming from a Canon, so it may very well be that that's what's slowing this down, because this is looking a little bit slow based on what I've been seeing for the past couple weeks. Alright, so I'm just going to stop my render. And what we can do, though, is let's take a quick check on this and see what this does. So I'm going to zoom this out, start this render, and you can see that it's rendering just those shots in that section of the timeline. There was a shot in between them, it skipped it, goes to the next shot, 5 seconds remaining. And you can see on this shot I'm getting near real time, and we're done. Boom. Beauteous. All right, anything else I need to mention? Oh yeah, also in here you can switch between timelines. So if you have multiple timelines loaded up, you can pull them up and use them to create other jobs, and then you can do a start render and render multiple jobs all at once. All right, so overall, I think the DaVinci team did a fantastic job on this release. The software is moving in the right direction. A lot of fun to work with. Love the pop-out curves. Fantastic. I'm a bit of a. I like curves. I think there's a great place in them for the work that we do, and this really didn't do it justice. This absolutely does. This is right now the best curves editor I think I've seen on the market. And although I haven't touched Baselight, so I don't know what Baselight looks like. But from what I've seen, that's affordable for most of us. This is by far the nicest curves editor. Except I want to be able to adjust the gain. I want to be able to move left on the highlights, right on the shadows. Essentially, make a gain adjustment in here, and as I can do in Symphony, which is hugely useful for balancing out on the RGB parades. Oh yeah, one last thing while we're at it, as giving up final thoughts. Show scopes, and the brand new scopes. Fantastic stuff. 4 up, 2 up. In here you can change what the different, on the 2 up, I can come up here and say, yeah, I want the vector scope instead. Get our brightness controls. The famous eye line is missing, which is probably just as well. And then in here I can select, so in each one here I can change that to parade and change that to waveform. And on the waveform I can also say, yeah, I don't want a color. And let's adjust the brightness. And you can even turn off RGB channels. I'd love to be able to turn off RGB channels up here. I'd love to be able to just look at the red channel, the blue channel, or the green channel. But I can't. And then you go 1 up. The only thing to remember about these are much prettier to look at now. Really, frankly, much more useful. But they still take CPU overhead. They still tax your CPU. something to consider, something to think about. But if you have a second monitor, you could always throw this off on your second monitor. And yeah, so this is a welcome update. All right, that's it. So that's my overview of DaVinci Resolve 9 for Resolve 8 users. Hope you feel comfortable in here. I got to tell you, where I think the huge improvements in workflow come on Resolve is at the beginning of the session and the end of the session. In the middle of the session, the bulk of it, where we're actually doing our work, I just feel like I'm in Resolve. I'm working in nodes the way I always work with. I'm working with still stores. I'm doing selections. I'm doing, my power windows. Everything feels like it did before. It's really on the front end and the back end that I see the huge differences. But the little improvements I'm seeing, like my pop-up curves here, huge, love it. So that's not to say that there isn't stuff that I find useful while I'm grading, but for the most part, for me, once I'm zoned in and I'm grading for 8 hours, it feels like Resolve, and that's probably the highest compliment I can pay the guys. They did this massive reinvent and didn't lose the core of what DaVinci Resolve is. So kudos to those guys. Hope you guys enjoy this, and you can expect a lot more with more details on very specific areas. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and have fun on Resolve 9.